Have you ever sat in a quiet room, surrounded by everything you once prayed for, yet your heart still feels strangely empty? You look at your life, the people you love, the goals you've achieved, the things you've collected, and still, something feels missing? It's like a soft ache beneath the surface, a heaviness you can't explain, a quiet whisper inside you asking, why doesn't this feel like enough? There is a moment, a sacred moment, where the soul becomes louder than the world, where your own heart begins to speak, not in words, but in a deep, aching silence. And in that silence, you realize the emptiness you feel is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that something inside you is waking up. Maybe your heart feels empty because it has been holding things it was never meant to hold. Maybe you've been trying to fill yourself through people who were also hurting. Maybe you've been running after things that cannot stay. Maybe you've been placing your heart in hands that were never created to protect it. And every time those things slip away, your heart collapses a little more until one day it finally whispers, I can't do this anymore. A pause for a moment. Think about the last time you felt deeply fulfilled, not happy, not excited, but peaceful. A type of contentment that sinks softly into your chest and makes you breathe differently. When was that? And more importantly, what was the source of that feeling? Was it a person, a moment, a success? Or was it a moment where you felt close to Allah? Because here is the truth we rarely admit. The heart becomes empty when it forgets its owner. The soul becomes restless when it is fed everything except what it was created for. And no matter how much we try to fill ourselves with people, achievements, admiration, distractions, entertainment, the emptiness returns. It always returns. Your heart knows its creator, even when your mind forgets, even when your days become loud, even when your life becomes crowded. Your heart remembers. And the emptiness you feel is the heart calling you back. It's a sign that you've been pouring your worship into things that cannot give you life. It's a sign that you've been seeking fulfillment from sources that were never meant to satisfy you. Allah created your heart with a space only He can fill, and every time you try filling that space with anything else, it leaks, it drains, it collapses. The dunya was never meant to sit on the throne of your heart. That place belongs to Allah alone. And so the question rises gently, almost painfully. What if your heart feels empty, not because something is missing from your life, but because something is missing from your connection with Allah? What if the emptiness is a mercy, a divine signal guiding you back to the one who loves you more deeply, more consistently, and more loyally than anyone in this world ever will? Emptiness is not the end. Emptiness is the beginning. It is the moment Allah opens a door inside you, a door you may not have noticed before, a door that leads back to Him. And today, maybe this video is part of that calling. Maybe this is the moment your heart wakes up again. So ask yourself gently, honestly, why does my heart feel empty? And what is Allah trying to show me through this feeling? Because sometimes the emptiness you fear is actually the doorway to the healing you've been praying for. Sometimes the real question isn't why your heart feels empty. It's why you kept pouring it into places that were never meant to hold it. We live in a world that constantly tells us that fulfillment comes from people, achievements, validation, attention, or moments of excitement. And so slowly, without realizing it, we hand pieces of our heart to the wrong sources. We give our peace to conversations that drain us. We give our worth to people who barely notice us. We give our stability to outcomes we can't control. And then we wonder why the heart feels hollow, why something inside us keeps sinking, why nothing, absolutely nothing, feels enough. But emptiness doesn't appear suddenly. It creeps in quietly, in the moments when we start tying our emotional survival to things that are temporary. You tell yourself, if this person stays, I'll be okay. Or if this opportunity works out, I'll finally be happy. Or if I just get this one thing, then my heart will be whole again. And for a moment, maybe it works. Maybe you feel a spark, a tiny burst of relief. But the heart is not designed to be sustained by sparks. It needs a flame. And only Allah can be that flame. The Prophet 8 taught us that the heart is a vessel. It fills, it empties, it breaks, it heals. But what you fill it with determines whether you rise or collapse. When the heart attaches itself too deeply to anything other than Allah, the result is always the same: instability. You start depending on what can disappear. You start expecting from what cannot give. You start longing for what was never written to stay. And with every disappointment, the emptiness grows a little more. You see, emptiness is not a punishment. It's a sign, a divine signal that you've been knocking on doors that were not yours, holding on to people who were only meant to be passengers, searching for comfort in things that were never capable of carrying you. Allah allows that emptiness because sometimes the heart cannot turn back to Him until it realizes the world cannot fill it. Emptiness pushes you to look up. Emptiness pushes you to remember what you forgot. Emptiness pushes you to return. And perhaps the hardest part is admitting that you tried to fill the heart with everything except the one who created it. You gave too much of yourself to people who didn't know how to protect it. You let your peace depend on things that constantly changed. You let your happiness depend on moments that faded. And now, Allah is calling you back to the one place your heart was always meant to rest. But before we go deeper, we need to ask ourselves something important. What if the emptiness you feel right now is not a failure, but an invitation? What if Allah is emptying your heart only so He can fill it with something far better, far purer, far more lasting? What if the ache is actually a doorway? When you finally pause long enough to look inside yourself, you begin to realize something profound. The emptiness you feel isn't because your heart is broken. It's because it's unanchored. And an unanchored heart drifts. It clings to whatever feels close, whatever feels warm, whatever feels promising, but like a boat tied to a weak rope, it keeps getting pulled away by the next wave. This is why Allah keeps reminding us, again and again in the Quran, that true tranquility comes only from remembering Him, not because He wants to limit you, but because He knows the structure of your soul. He knows what holds you together and what slowly tears you apart. The heart was created with a spiritual hunger. It longs for connection, meaning, stability, and love. But the kind that doesn't fluctuate with mood swings, disappear overnight, or fade with time. When you depend on people for that type of fulfillment, even unintentionally, you start building emotional homes in places that were never meant to stay. You hope someone will fill the void, soothe the loneliness, or silence the fears. You tell yourself, if they understand me, I'll feel whole again. Or, if they love me enough, I won't feel this emptiness anymore. But people, even the best of them, are human. They come with their own wounds, limitations, distractions, and weaknesses. They cannot be consistent sources of comfort. Not because they don't care, but because they were never designed for that role. The heart that depends on people alone will always end up disappointed, even if those people mean well. Because only Allah can handle the weight of your need. Allah says, and indeed, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. Notice He doesn't say, maybe, or sometimes, or when things are going well. He says the heart finds rest, it discovers it, returns to it, settles into it, when it reconnects with Him. This is the difference between worldly comfort and divine comfort. One is temporary, the other is transformational. One distracts you, the other heals you. One numbs the pain, the other removes it from the root. The emptiness inside you didn't appear to destroy you. It appeared to redirect you. Sometimes Allah removes worldly attachments to make space for something far deeper, your return to Him. Sometimes He lets you feel the ache so you stop feeding your heart with the wrong things. Sometimes he breaks the illusion so you finally see the truth. And that truth is simple. You cannot heal a spiritual wound with worldly bandages. You cannot fill a spiritual void with human hands. You cannot expect the creation to play the role of the creator. But here's where something beautiful happens. The moment you turn back to Allah, sincerely, even if you're trembling, even if you're confused, even if you feel numb, the heart begins to soften, the emptiness begins to lighten, the heaviness begins to lift. Because Allah responds to every step you take toward Him, even the small ones you think don't count. And that brings us to the real turning point. What if the emptiness you feel is actually the beginning of your healing, not the end of it? What if Allah isn't asking you to carry the pain, but to hand it over? Before we move into how Allah heals the heart, gently ask yourself this. Are you ready to stop seeking fulfillment from those who cannot give it and finally return to the one who always can? When you finally admit to yourself that the emptiness inside you isn't a failure but a sign something shifts, the heart becomes quiet enough to listen. And in that silence, you begin to notice something you were too overwhelmed to see before. Allah has been healing you all along, just not in the ways you expected. Sometimes we look for healing in dramatic signs, sudden changes, or emotional breakthroughs. But Allah heals the heart the way dawn breaks a dark sky slowly, gently, silently until you suddenly realize light is everywhere. The first way Allah heals is through His mercy. Even when you turn away, even when you forget Him, even when you're lost in your own sadness, His mercy calls you back. Every prayer you suddenly feel the urge to pray again, that is healing. Every moment you cry and unexpectedly feel calmer afterward, that is healing. Every time you think you're breaking, but something unseen holds you together, that is healing. His mercy meets you exactly where you are, even in the scattered pieces of your heart. The second way Allah heals is through His timing. Humans rush. We want instant relief, instant clarity, instant peace. But the heart doesn't work that way. And Allah knows this. He waits until your heart is ready to receive what He's preparing for you. He delays certain answers not to punish you but to protect you. Because He knows what premature healing looks like. He knows that if He gave you what you're asking for, while your heart is still wounded, you might lose it again. So He waits, not because He doesn't hear you, but because He loves you too deeply to give you something you're not strengthened enough to hold. The third way Allah heals is through His wisdom. He removes what harms you even when you beg Him to keep it. He closes doors you were desperately trying to open because He knows what's behind them. He empties your hands so you can finally receive better. He isolates you so He can reshape you. Sometimes what feels like loneliness is actually divine surgery, removing what's unhealthy, what's dependent, what's fragile inside you so you can rise again without breaking the same way. And His wisdom isn't always gentle. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it feels like everything is falling apart. But even that pain is wrapped in protection. Because Allah doesn't wound the heart. He exposes the wound that's already there, so He can heal it properly. What you think is destruction is often reconstruction. What you think is an ending is often the beginning of your real transformation. But healing doesn't always feel like healing. Sometimes it feels like losing people you love, losing plans you were attached to, losing versions of yourself you thought you needed. And in those moments, it's easy to think Allah abandoned you. But He didn't. He was simply removing the noise so you could finally hear Him. The heartbreak, the emptiness, the confusion, they are not punishments. They are invitations. And that's where the real question emerges, quietly but powerfully. What if the hardest things you've lived through were actually the exact moments Allah was pulling you closer to Him? Before we move into the final section, pause for a moment and ask yourself gently, are you willing to let Allah finish the healing He has already begun in you? Because the next step is where the heart truly starts to come alive. When you finally reach the point where you stop running from the emptiness, something sacred happens. Instead of fighting it, you begin to understand it. You begin to see that the void inside your heart was never meant to be a source of despair, but an invitation, an opening that leads you back to the one who created you. The heart doesn't become whole by accident. It becomes whole by returning. And that return begins with small, quiet, intentional steps toward Allah, steps that seem simple but carry the power to rewrite your inner world. The first step is turning your pain into dua. It doesn't have to be eloquent. It doesn't have to be long. Sometimes it's just one whispered sentence. Why Allah? Heal me? And the beauty is that He hears even the sentences you can't fully say. Every time you raise your hands, even when you feel numb, even when you feel distant, that is the heart choosing Allah again. That is the soul remembering where home truly is. The Prophet said, "Your Lord is shy to leave the hands of His servant empty when He raises them to Him." That means your dua is never unanswered. It might be answered differently, quietly, or at a time you don't expect, but never ignored. The second step is anchoring your heart in remembrance. Your heart doesn't become strong by force, it becomes strong by consistency. A few minutes of dhikr in the morning, a quiet moment of istighfar before sleeping, a single heartfelt alhamdulillah after a difficult day. These are not small gestures. They are emotional lifelines. They rewire the heart, cleanse it, stabilize it. They remind your soul that you are cared for, guided, and held even when life feels chaotic. The third step is protecting your heart from what drains it. Sometimes the heart remains empty because it is constantly pouring into the wrong things. People who don't value you, relationships that consume more than they give, environments that darken your spirit, habits that weaken your connection with Allah. Healing requires boundaries. It requires saying no to what harms your soul so you can say yes to what nourishes it. Letting go is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is trusting that when you leave something for Allah, He replaces it with something better. Always. The fourth step is spending time in silence with Allah. Not scrolling, not talking, not distracting yourself. Just sitting with your breath and your thoughts. Because sometimes the healing you're asking for arrives in the moments you slow down enough to feel it. The Quran you recite in those quiet moments, the tears that fall without warning, the sudden sense of calm. These are all signs that Allah is closer to you than you ever realized. But here is where the true transformation begins, when you allow Allah to fill the space inside you that the world could not. When you stop trying to heal by running outward and finally turn inward toward the one who has been waiting for you since the beginning. Healing isn't about becoming who you were. It's about becoming who Allah always intended you to be. Softer, wiser, stronger, closer to Him. And as we close this journey together, ask yourself one last, gentle question. If Allah is the one who created your heart, then who else can you trust to heal it? If this message touched your heart, share your reflections in the comments. Tell me what part spoke to you the most. I rate everything. And don't forget to subscribe, because more reminders like this are coming, and your heart deserves every moment of healing it can find.